I was just wondering if you could all come forward a bit, please. Yesterday, at the end of the day, I lost my voice.
Standing on his toes in here.
After doing 6 meetings a day and talking on the phone all day, you tend to lose your voice, so that's good, yeah, thank you. Okay, so welcome to Pinky Point at Thevenard. From the Thevenard Master Plan, the Ceduna Council a number of years did a master plan that nominated this area as being a tourist precinct. And today we're opening the Eleni interpretive shelter, which fits with that scenario nicely. How it's all happened is that Anne Brooks came to me 2 years ago and said, Perry, I've got an anchor off the Eleni Cay. And he showed me a photo of it sitting on the Thevenard jetty, which has recently gone onto Facebook again. And I said to Anne, are you sure that it is one from the Eleni Cay? Because there's one down by the sailing club that there's been quite a bit of argument about over the years, whether that is one off the Eleni Cay or not. But he'd spoken to Greg Sleep here, and Greg said, yes, no, that's definitely off the Eleni Cay. And there is another one of them that the Paul family have down at Venus Bay. So I thought, well, that sounds reasonably good to me, that people know what's going on with it. And I knew Greg had been doing a whole lot of research on this, and has now written a book which is for sale here today as well. I was pretty happy to go ahead with and to organise that we display this anchor as a tourist attraction here in Ceduna. And you may not, like in our 10 years now in the visitor centre, the people from elsewhere in Australia are really interested in like the small things that have happened in Australia. And the sinking of the Eleni Cay here in the Channel in September 1966, there is quite a bit of interest for them to read the signage that we've got in here. So I think it's a worthwhile, or has been a worthwhile thing to do. As per usual, Buzzy's the main man that's taken the lead with this. He's a practical sort of guy that sees an opportunity and gets on with it and does it. And basically, we can hand it down to Buzzy for what we see here today. Just before I hand over to him, I'd like to, for a start, there's a couple of apologies. One is from Bob Skinner. Bob gave $100 towards the project. Firstly, it was in memory of his father, who worked down here on the wharf for 30-something years. And I was going to read the letter out, but it is a little bit long, but read it out? Okay. So, dear Perry, please accept my and Jenny apologies for not being, at the opening of the Eleni Cay anchor. As you know, I gave $100 in memory of my father, Ern Skinner, who started work at Thevenard for the Marine and Harbours Board in 1932 and retired in 1969, 37 years. One of his projects was to plant the Norfolk Island pines and to water them with a 44-gallon drum in the back of his utility. He also helped stop the netting and fishing at Thevenard. All the best for the day, Bob Skinner. So the pines he's talking about are the Norfolk Island pines that you see over here. I can just imagine Bob doing that, putting a 44-gallon drum of water in the back of his ute and watering them to keep him going. The other one is Ance Brooks. Ance has been, he organised for the sandblasting and the painting of the anchor. He's now gone to Western Australia. He's actually just south of Mandurah, in a little place called Heron. It's sort of between Collins Pool and Lake Clifton. And when I was speaking to him yesterday, Jenny and he was out fencing a 14-hectare property they bought there. So, as Ance was talking about, I could hear him giving Jenny instructions in the background about what to do. So, yeah. Anyway, I would now like to hand over to Buzzy Willis, President of the Thevenard Ratepayers Group, to speak about the sponsors who made this project possible. So, Buzzy, thank you.
Thanks, Perry. Good morning, all. Don't mind if I don't look up because I've got to read what I did. I'd like to thank everyone who made the effort to come here today from far and wide to show their support for our great community. I'd especially like to thank the ship's captain's daughter and family, Mrs. Filio Mongus Califilianis. Sorry if I got that wrong. And family for travelling all the way from Adelaide to open our wonderful shelter here today. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
I would also like to thank Perry Will, who was the main driver in getting this project off the ground, which was conceived over 2 years ago, and with many meetings under our belt to see what we have here today. I'd also like to make a special mention to Greg Sleep for allowing us to use his research and photos in the interpretive shelter, who wrote the book Loss of the Liberty Ship, which is a story of the Eleni K, which once again Perry mentioned is on available here today. Okay, I'd like to take this time to sincerely thank all those who made this shelter possible by donating their time, money, or services, and in some instances all three. And in no particular order they are: Ceduna Foreshore Hotel Motel, the District Council of Ceduna, Sandy Walker, Ants Brooks, formerly from Ceduna Metal Solutions, Port Lincoln Tugs, Bob Skinner, Thevenard Hotel, M&M Custom Concrete, Gateway Tax and Advisory, Steve Caron, formerly from EP Concrete, Ceduna National Trust Museum, Ricey's Recovery Service, myself, Buzzy's Enterprises, Greg Sleep, as previously mentioned, and of course the Thevenard Resident Ratepayers Group. We here at the Thevenard Resident Ratepayers Group are only a small group, however our hearts and passion are huge for our little bit of paradise we call Thevenard. The shelter is a great tranquil spot to come and have your lunch while watching the shipping and fishing activities unfold in front of you, as you see here right now. Or just sit and ponder while watching one of the many great sunsets we have here on the west coast. While I got you all here, I'd like to take a moment to mention a couple other projects that have not long been completed out here at Thevenard. One of which is the new coloured lights that are lighting up our silos each night. With a big thank you to the Ceduna Foreshore Hotel Motel, District Council of Ceduna and Viterra for getting these up and running. Right. The other is the mosaic wall, which is down on the back of the half-court wall in the new park area, which is just down here opposite the Greek church. So if you haven't actually seen any of that, take a moment and go and have a look, either at night or down here on the way out at the half-court, because they do look great, and it's a great asset for our town. Okay, that's nearly it for me, before I hand over to Greg Sleep. And you're all invited back to the Thevi Hotel for a yarn and a cuppa or a beverage after the opening. And once again, thank you for coming out to join us today. And I'd like to finish up with a quote I've pinched from my mate. Without good people, you got nothing. So please put your hands together for who made this possible. And as I hand over to Greg Sleep, thank you.
Thanks Perry and Buzzy and everyone involved with the Thevenard Ratepayers and Residents Group, and welcome to Philia and your family. Privileged to be here to commemorate a significant part of Thevenard and Ceduna's maritime history. Having one of Eleni K's anchors mounted here on display is a very appropriate symbol of the ship itself and the incident when it broke its back and became a part of our history. So this Pinky Point lookout is a perfect spot for this display, because it looks over the wharf where the ship loaded, and after she broke her back and foundered, she could be seen quite clearly from here out of the channel entrance, where she sat for a few weeks. And then after that, as we know, she was towed out to Goat Island, which we could just see off the end of St. Peter's Island here behind the ship. I'm not going to talk so much about the history of Liberty ships or the Eleni K, because that's written in the book and on the interpretive signage here, but I want to focus more on how my book came about. So I first scuba dived on the wreck in November 1982 with Sandy Walker. I don't know if Sandy's here today, but...
No, Sandy, apologies, sorry.
Yeah, right. So I dived with Sandy Walker, so that's appropriate for today too. And Greg Donahue and Fred De La Rosa and another man from the railways, Bob Helmers. But it wasn't until the late 1990s that I got quite interested in the Eleni K wreck and its impact on Thevenard and Ceduna. I got to know a guy called Terry Arnott, who was a Maritime Heritage Officer with the Department of Environment and Heritage. Now Terry, he lived and breathed maritime history, as some guys over here know. He was an amazing man. He'd already researched Eleni K and he'd already written and presented some work about the ship. And when I told him that I wanted to do something, or put something together about the ship as well, he actually gave me copies of his research material, and that got me going on the book. So it was a really good start. I could see that the impact of the shipwreck was fading locally, and it would be a great pity if the Eleni K was forgotten. So I put a lot of work into research back in the late 90s, it was a fair while ago now. But then I put it all down, and it wasn't until after I retired 3 years ago that I picked it up again and got going with the aim of publishing a book. Now back when I was doing that early research, I was fortunate to be able to contact and visit and interview Eleni K's captain, Nick Mangos. He played an integral part in this story, and it was a privilege to be able to hear what he had to say. And it's an honour to have his daughter Philia here today. I had some amazing contributions for the book from archives and museums in America, and our visit to one of the last Liberty ships in existence, the Jeremiah O'Brien in San Francisco, was very special. But there are also a lot of local people involved with input in the book, like Barry Kelly's involvement in this salvage of the grain from the wreck was very important. He told me what was done and how it was done, and provided some great photos too. And I also saw in the Sentinel that Ken Puckridge, that's Malcolm's father, had a lot to do with the grain salvage. Both Johnny Jones and Bobby Sims talked to me about the part they played in manning the pilot launch at the time. In fact, John told me that at the time that the Eleni back actually broke, he was 400 metres away in the launch, and he heard it go crash. So she must have really gone off, you know. So another local, John Retsis, also known as the Greek, told me that when Eleni first came to Thevenard, he and Peter Mattengard did some temporary welding even then to some of the bulkheads before the ship went to Adelaide for more substantial repairs. John also supplied some aerial photos, and I've used one of them in the book. And although they didn't make a contribution, it was interesting to find out who the local wharfies were back in the day. I sat down with Dave Uzzell years ago in his shed one day, and he reeled off the names of a few that he thought were there when Eleni came to town. I'll just mention a few names because it's a real Thevenard influence. He mentioned Eddie Wilson, Porky Fitzgerald, Jack Nichols, George Mastrosavis, John Kavanagh, Bobby Kavanagh, Paddy Caney, Muscles Denton, Doug Duncan, Jock Nesbitt, Ron Armour, Colin Armour, Jock Dunkley, Peter Beveridge, Horry Jolly, Tuffy Nesbitt, Ross Caney and Good Chandler. So there's a real list of well-known Thevenard names. And from that list of names, Horry Jolly stands out because he was the only person to do legitimate salvage from the wreck. I sat down and had a yarn with him one day about it all, and although his mind was a bit vague at the time, I did get some more knowledge from him. And he proudly showed me the barometer that he still had at the time as a keepsake from that job. Eric Whitehead was another local who had a bit to do with the wreck. He told me a few stories that were very interesting. And when it came to getting photos of the ship, quite a few local people come up with the goods. David Harding gave me some excellent shots. Leon Swats and Leon Burbner too. Sue Schroeder had a good photo taken by her dad. Gary Clayton had some taken by his brother Bobby. Grant Thistleton come up with a few taken by his grandfather, Dutchy Thistleton. And Rick Price had a couple taken in later years. There were a couple of great colour photos taken by Bill Mayfield. He was a teacher and deputy principal here at the time. I managed to contact him by phone a couple of years back, and he was getting on in years, but he remembered the ship well and was happy for the photos to go in the book. Some other photos in the book were supplied by people who aren't locals, but there's a couple of them here today over there. Stuart Moody, he died on the Eleni in about 1980. Stuart's written some excellent books on shipwrecks up the York Peninsula where he lives. And also Steve Saville was here. He supplied all the underwater photos in the book. You can find all of Steve's. He's got a lot of videos about South Australian shipwrecks on his YouTube site called Oz Diver Down. If the Thevenard Ratepayers group can get hold of the second main anchor, which is a possibility, and get it mounted up here. Yeah.
That's what the plate's been put there for. So.
If we get another one mounted here, this whole display will be so much better again. It'll be fantastic. Yeah. Now, 18 months ago, I sort of hoped that this sort of opening could happen in conjunction with the launch of my book, but that's well in the past now. So, but I do have books for sale today, and I hope we have a great day today. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg, and thank you, Buzzy. So now we come to the official part where I'll ask Philia and her daughters, Nicola, Elena and Paulina. I think Nicole's going to say a few words. So perhaps if you come across here and some of the other sisters come across. They've also brought along a photograph of their father that's on the table here, and this was his captain's hat that's here as well. So they wanted his presence to be here with us today as well. So, Nicole.
Good morning, my name is Nicola Kithlianos and I'm the granddaughter and namesake of Captain Nicholas Mangos, the last commander of the historical liberty taker Eleni. A Greek migrant by chance, my grandfather was born on the 14th of December 1935 on a small sponge fishing island of Kalymnos. Son of a sea captain, his destiny was to be at sea. An intelligent, determined, tenacious, successful, enduring type of person, Nicholas would realise his dream at the tender age of 25 and become the world's youngest sea captain of his time. His travels around the globe countless, and his ventures at sea many and successful. He literally travelled the 7 seas. His passion for the sea evident, running his ships with utmost precision. His meticulous organisation and management of his ships would ensure that his voyages were safe and most part successful. However, his last voyage was realised on the 29th of September 1966. The poorly loaded and unseaworthy Eleni would leave him at the shores of Thevenard, Ceduna. He would leave his beloved Eleni and the newspapers would read, "Lost ship but found love." He was taken by the providore another fellow Greek, George Kostalos, who would later become his best man and one of his best mates to my great-grandfather's home, who was also a Greek sea captain. There he would meet the next love of his life, my grandmother Paula. After a very short courting, they married. My grandfather, as much as he loved the sea, never travelled again. He embraced his new home in Australia and fell in love with things such as cricket and footy. I'm told he was a quintessential Greek Aussie. Australia gave him opportunities that maybe would never have come his way. Most importantly, he met my grandmother and had my mother Philia. He made many friends over the years, and I'm told he was the life of the party. He leaves behind a great legacy and so many memories, and even though I have never met him, I'm so proud of his achievements and even more proud and honoured to have his name and to be here today. Thank you, Eleni for leaving our grandfather on the Australian shores. Our family would like to take this opportunity to thank the Mayor of Ceduna, Mr Perry Will, Thevenard Ratepayers and Residents Group for sponsorship of this wonderful moment in history, and Mr Greg Sleep, author of Loss of a Liberty Ship, Eleni Possible. We are honoured and humbled and very proud to represent our father and grandfather who would have absolutely loved and revelled in this moment of history.
Thank you, Nicole. Yeah, no, just stay there now. Yeah. Okay, that was a fantastic narration of the father and what's happened on the family side of the Eleni. I'll now ask Philia and her daughters to officially open the Eleni interpretive shelter and to cut the ribbon.
I officially open the Eleni interpretive shelter.
Thank you. So that ends our celebration today. You can now go through and have a look at what has been put here, the 6 big signs. And afterwards, as Buzzy said, we can have a few drinks up in the Heavy pub if you want to join us up there.
There'll be tea and coffee there available as well.
Yeah. All right, well, go and have a look.
Hello, how are you? Everybody. It was my husband, Oh, really?
Because you see his granddaughters and his daughter, you can see, don't you? There's a lot on it.
Yeah. What does it show? It shows
This is their
Hey, come on. Hello, John.
Hey, guys. Hello, hả?